as Mike mentioned, I was a co-founder of Remix, but that was like mostly just in title. I participated a lot in conversation and in Michael for 2 years, and then and joined up with them about a year after they formed the company. So calling me a co-founder is like kind of a misnomer. It's just a weird thing, but I was very much involved, very much in love with Remix and what it does. I would do terrible things if I could have had Remix at PayPal. Okay, wouldn't have done bad things, but just Remix totally changes the game. And I hope to demonstrate a little bit of that today. Anyway, Remix is amazing. It's a full stack web framework with using React as the UI library currently. And I think that you should give it some attention. And I'm going to be demonstrating stuff in Remix. So if you've never heard of Remix before, there may be some concepts that are confusing to you. And because this is not a like Apple keynote, you're totally okay to interrupt me and say, I don't get that. So please do. So I want to talk a little bit about the marriage of UI. In 2022, this is what it feels like to build a page in Remix. So you have a loader, an action, and a default export that's a React component. I mentioned we're at a React meetup, so like most of y'all are excited about React and stuff. But if there's any of you who are like, I'm at this meetup because my friend brought me, but I actually like Vue or whatever, or maybe you like both and you're excited about that. Eventually, Remix will actually support any UI library that you want. I really like React, and so that's why we're using React here. And currently, Remix only supports React, but just so you know, if you're like Vue curious or something, or Svelte or Solid or Astro, like whatever, yeah, Quick, all of these eventually will be supported. So let's talk about each of these. First off, we have our loader. This runs on the server only. And so that means that, and this is for loading data into your UI. So that means because it runs on the server, you don't have CORS issues. You don't have protected like or private key issues. Like, so you can just use your private keys. You can talk directly to a database, like whatever you want. You can still do fetch requests and stuff. You can use async await because it's not inside a React component. And I know that like Next.js is like, yay, async await and components and stuff. That's not released yet. That's not a thing. React server components aren't a thing yet. So as cool as they are, I prefer to ship products on stable software that has been released. And we have that already with this loader. So in the loader, you do whatever you need to get your data. Also, another cool thing, and since I have so much time, I can really go deep into this stuff. The loader, because it only runs on the server, you can call like 30 different services that you're depending on, or like whether it's microservices or your third-party APIs or whatever. And then you bring it all together in your loader. You do whatever number crunching you need to do, and then you just send back the like minimal stuff your UI needs. So the whole like one of the main reasons people got really excited about GraphQL was to solve the data overfetching problem, where you get tons of data into the client, do all your calculations, and just display like a single number that's a calculation of all of those things. And so that's like just very wasteful. So by virtue of this running on the server, technically, yeah, maybe it's still a little wasteful because your servers are talking to each other, sending too much data, but that doesn't matter because it's servers, and so who cares? So it's only in the UI where that is a major problem. So this is really cool. This runs on the server, and then you send back a response. This is this JSON function is just a utility function for creating an HTTP response. We're sending our project back, and then in our UI, we have this use loaded data hook that we use to get the projects. And it's fully typed as well. And we'll actually see some of that today, where, I mean, you don't have to use TypeScript if you don't care about solid. No, just kidding. I know some people have opinions about TypeScript. And if you're not on board, you'll come around. Don't worry. Okay. I'm totally kidding. But I'm totally not either. So, so this type safety across the network boundary is actually hugely awesome. Especially if you're interacting with other type-safe APIs or talking to an ORM that is type-safe. You get type safety from end to end, and it's just phenomenally awesome from just your developer productivity standpoint, as well as like your code quality and confidence in deploying. So our UI gets the projects here, and then we can map over those, do whatever we need to in our UI, render link tags to get to the specific project, all that. And then we can also render a form. And this is a remix form that does event prevent default, so we don't get a full page refresh. That's like what the regular forms do. But then it simulates exactly what the browser would do with the form. So it automatically will take care of serializing all of the field inputs and handling the fetch request that will call your backend, which again is in the same file in this action function. And so that's pretty rad that like all of this is in a single file. Your backend, your front end, everything's running in one file. So it makes the type safety really nice across that that network boundary. And it also, sorry, I just realized something. Oh, rats. I forgot to add the code for validation. That's too bad. Because like validation is actually also really cool. Do validation. Yeah, that was a note to myself to add validation later. Or it wasn't supposed to be, but now it is. So anyway, this action receives the request that is the request that happens when the user submits this form. And it can retrieve the form data out of it. Now this is interesting because normally when people are looking at this stuff like web fetch APIs, most of the web fetch APIs people are looking at are like fetch, thing, then, or you're maybe await. You've got const response, and then you're like await response JSON, right? Or whatever you want to call that, right? This is most people's exposure to request response, at least for UIs. But there's a whole like actual request object as well. And it's not just JSON. You also have .text and array buffer and form data. And so this is all web platform stuff. There's and what's really, really awesome about this is that the skills that you develop as you're learning Remix are transferable. Before I was into React, feels like an age ago, I was into AngularJS. And one of the things that I really lamented when I left AngularJS into the React community was all the stuff that was AngularJS specific that I was learning that I was leaving behind because I couldn't bring it with me. Like nobody else had a digest cycle or scope or the compile. The amount of time I spent inside of their compiler, like debugging through that, that's where I learned what named labels are and stuff in JavaScript. Wish I could forget that. So like so much framework specific knowledge just gone. And when I started using React, I realized like the better I get at React, the better I get at JavaScript because it's all just like you're using regular objects. You say, you know, literally projects.map. That's an array thing. I never did that in AngularJS. Because in AngularJS templates, you had like a special I can never remember what ng repeat, and so like you look all this stuff. But so that's what one of the things I loved about React was like how much just JavaScript it is. This is literally it takes you half a day to learn how JSX works, and then you can convert this into JavaScript in your brain. And so it really is all just JavaScript. I love that. Well, with Remix, it's all just the web platform. And where most frameworks and most of the time in past, what I would do when I build an abstraction is I would say, here's the web API for this. I'm going to wrap it with my own special API that like has good defaults and whatever things that I think are going to make this experience of developing better. And now people have to learn my specific thing. Well, how many of you all are using testing library? Okay, sweet, React testing library. So when I was working on testing library, one of the things that bothered me a lot about Enzyme was the wrapper thing. How many of you used Enzyme? Okay, a handful of you. Yeah, I can see the scars. No, just kidding. Enzyme was okay. But one of the things that bothered me about it was the wrapper. I just wanted to get the DOM node and like make some assertions on what attributes it had and stuff. And there were like 2 APIs you had to call into from the wrapper to get the actual DOM node it represented, which like drove me bonkers. And so when I was building testing library, I'm like, we are just working with DOM nodes. You make a query call, and I'm going to give you back a DOM node. This is web platform stuff. And you want to fire an event. I'm not going to simulate some stupid event that's React specific. I'm just going to dispatch an event the way that the browser does. Now, of course, when the user clicks on it, they're they're doing something special, and there are some slight differences with that. There's only so much we can do from a code perspective, but it's pretty dang close. And all of the implementation details just like fade away, and it's amazing, wonderful experience. And so from that, I learned that instead of wrapping APIs and into what like my own idea of the perfect abstraction, what you want to do is expose the web platform and provide maybe some helpers with interacting with the web platform, but everything that people are dealing with is web platform stuff. And so when we look at this request object, this is HTTP requests. Like if we dive into the types for one of these right here, if I dive into the types, we go straight into the libdom. So this is like, yeah, libdom DTS. This is the web fetch API. That's really powerful. And that means that all the time you spend working with Remix, you are just expanding your knowledge of the web platform. It's really, really good stuff. It's not just another framework. It's just a really great way to learn the web. Okay, with all of that said, here we get our form data. Whatever was serialized by this form into this form data object. So now we've got the form, and we can get all the properties and whatever else was in that serialized in that form to do whatever we need to do on the server, validation, whatever else. We can do all sorts of things. And then in this case, we're redirecting to the new project. You can return a success message, or pop up as little things. So this would be good for a tweet favorite or something. Yeah.
How is the form data typed?
Yeah, good question. So the form data, some people don't like this. I say blame the web platform. Yeah, so here's an actual instance of this. If we dive into form data, that is right here. This is, again, in the libdom. So if you don't like the API, don't get mad at me, get mad at the W3C. Yeah, so we've got this get and get all, and it has like, it's all this special form data stuff. You can actually make one of these in the browser. New form data. That's teeny. Whoop, that is too big. Let me just scoot this over to the side. I was working on a narrow screen earlier. Form data, boom, there it is. You can make one of these in the browser. It's all web platform stuff. And actually, if you have a form on the page, you can say new form data and then form element, like go query your form element. And it will serialize all the values in that form element, which is pretty rad. So one thing that people who work in this for a while are like, yeah, this is garbage. I don't want to say get like all 30 field. Like, look at this, get, and you're now get all. What is this? Yeah, super annoying. If it really bothers you a ton, you can actually say object from entries form data. And boom, now you've got an object that you can destructure and whatever. Problem with this is, in a form, it's totally legit to have multiple items that are exactly the same name. And we actually have that case. This particular case I can show you in a little bit, but this is like an invoicing thing where you can add list items. And each one of those list items has this like same name. And so we're getting all of the line items and quantity and price for each one of those, and then turning it into an object thing. So anyway, yeah, if the API bothers you, you can continue to use JavaScript to make it better. But the core point of everything that I'm trying to say here is that Remix exposes the web platform to you, and then you can make all these nice little utilities on top of it that you want to. And what's cool about that is those utilities are useful outside of the Remix ecosystem. Okay, a bit of a tangent, but we got the time for it, and you can yell at me if you don't want me to go into those, but I think they're cool. So while all of that is happening, we do have a network. It doesn't matter how fast your server is, you don't control the user's network. And so we want to have some sort of pending UI. And that's where progressive enhancement comes into play. So like all of this stuff works without even having JavaScript in the browser, because all of our logic is on the server. We can even render this on the server. This renders to an actual form. The browser knows what to do with the form. And Remix is out of the box will handle form post requests and pass it to the right place. So it works whether JavaScript is in the client or not. But we want JavaScript in the client because we can do cool progressive enhancement things like adding a busy state to spinners or whatever else we want to control that. And so Remix gives you hooks into being able to know what's the current state of the transition that's happening so that you can show your UI feedback in that way. So that's what it looks like to create a page in 2022 with Remix, and it's phenomenal. I would have just loved to have this at PayPal. So like full stack routes, that's awesome. But not everything that we build is a route, right? A lot of things that we build are components that are like rendered even multiple times on a single route, or maybe rendered on lots of different routes. One use case I had was my newsletter website was rendered on a bunch of different pages and sometimes in different places. And so like it's cool that I can have all of my loader and my action and my UI all like for this particular route. But what if I have like basically all the same stuff on another route? Well, now I gotta like copy paste or use JavaScript to make functions and stuff. That's not as fun. And as this example, the Twitter favorite, like that component has a CSS element to it. It has HTML. It has JavaScript, and it has backend stuff too. We're making fetch requests. There's something that's going on the backend when you click on that. And another example, and this is the one we're actually going to be doing today, is this combo box example where you can type into an input and then it will do a search for specific customers. So maybe we render this all over the place. Maybe this is our like our Twitter app mentions or something. Like we have components like this all over the place that require CSS, HTML, JavaScript, and backend related code. And with React, we kind of married the idea between JavaScript and HTML and the template, right, with the JSX. And then CSS and JS is like, hey, how about us? And so now we're all in one place. And some people call Tailwind CSS and JS, and I kind of buy that. I'm okay with that. But the point is, like, you have your styling as part of your template now too. Not everybody's into that, but I super am. I love Tailwind. And like, what if we can just like shove some of our backend stuff into here as well? Like, there's a lot of benefit to co-locating this stuff. Like, as far as where code should live, it should live as close to the other code that changes with it as possible. Now, so for a UI component like this, we need an endpoint that searches customers. And that endpoint is literally only for this UI component. And so I want that code right here. So that's what we're going to be building. So we're going to build literally this experience. So we've got an export. Now we got to finish the YAML. Okay, so this is the where this UI lives. In here, we're going to need the network tab. We're going to have it right there. And actually, you know what? I could probably bump this up more. This is not a responsive site. So we're going to just get it up there so you can see it nice and clear. Okay, and actually, I don't need that. So we don't have the component rendered right there yet because we haven't built it. We're going to be building this component, this full stack component. The first thing that I want to show you is the loader piece. So when I'm building a new component like this or a new route, I work on the data loading. Like, what data do I need for this UI first? And so I've got a little trick here, Remix Loader, kablooey, where we can have this this loader. So this is this file follows the convention of Remix to have a file under app routes and then whatever route you want it to be. So anything under routes will be conventionally located at that URL. So for this particular file, we're in app routes resources customers. So whatever we return from this loader will be retrievable via /resources/customers. If I want to change that, I could say /Mike Rocks, and now I've got /Mike Rocks /customers, right? So it's a convention-based routing system. Remix also, you can do a code-based or configuration-based routing as well. But by golly, I like the file-based routing. It makes it really easy to navigate around the UI. So we've got our /resource/customers, which is where this is going to be. And I've got this JSON helper. Now, actually, just to show you what the JSON helper does, I'm gonna leave it off. We're gonna just return a new response. And now we dive into this. This is web fetch HTTP response, just regular response thing. So if you're like, how do you create a response. I didn't know how you do that. You can literally go to MDN to learn that. You don't have to go to the Remix docs. That's awesome. So we're going to say response, hello world, and we'll save that. And now if I go to /resources/customers, I'm going to get hello world. So that's cool, right? I just created myself an endpoint. Now, what if I wanted to have a JSON response? So we'll say JSON stringify hello world. And then, of course, I need to have the proper headers. My goodness. And content type application JSON. What happened to Copilot? I don't type stuff like this anymore. It types their own content type. I didn't even capitalize that. Doesn't have to be capitalized, but you know. Anyway, here we go. Now it's a JSON response. Cool. Now we do this a lot, JSON responses. So like I don't want to have to do that. So that's why we have the JSON utility. It does basically all of that for us because utils are nice like that. But I wanted you to see it is literally just making a response. Okay, cool. So now we have an endpoint. Let's search some customers on this endpoint. So the first thing that I want to do is I actually have authentication built into this app already, and I don't want my customers to be searchable by the World Wide Web. I want to secure this, so I'm going to await require user ID in the request. I'm not going to use the user ID. I don't actually care who is searching. I just need to make sure that they are logged in. And so with that now, I can still go there because I'm already logged in. But if I open incognito, I'm going to get redirected to the login so I can log in and then. So that's cool. The next thing is the way that we're going to have this work is we'll have a query equals whatever my query is. That's typically like for a search endpoint, unless you're doing GraphQL. For a search endpoint, you're going to do a GET request with preparams. You don't have to do it that way, but that's pretty typical of APIs, and I think that's reasonable for us. So that's why we're using the loader. Loader handle GET requests, and then we're going to get the URL from the request. So we'll say new URL, request.url. So the web platform says request.url is a string. So you can get mad at the web platform for that. So we have to put it into a URL, and then we can get search params off of that and say get query. Did I call it query? Yeah, I called it query. So now I have my query. So great. Now with the query, I've got this handy little search customers function that I pass the query to. And customers will come back from that. Now this is complaining because query could actually be null. Like if I did blah, 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 like that could be null. There's no way for TypeScript to really know. And there's actually no way for us to really know that the user provided the right query. Maybe they made a typo, right? So we do have to check that. I often say that TypeScript is not making your life worse. It's just showing you how bad your life already is. What we're going to do is we'll just say if that's null, let's make it an empty string. That's fine. Okay, so with our customers, we'll return those as a property on this object. So now I can come over here and I hit refresh, and there's all the matching customers. If I don't have a query, I'll see all the customers. Of course, like that search customers probably like filters down to just like 5 or I don't know, however many you want. The implementation of this is not important. The thing I want you to get out of this is 2 things. One, by making a loader in our route within the context of a Remix app, we're exposing an endpoint at the URL that matches where that file appears in the Remix directory. And 2, that we're just working with regular APIs or web platform APIs to get what the user is actually requesting, even authenticate the user, and then send back a web response. That's all that you need to get out of this. Now, if you haven't actually used Remix a lot, this might not seem all that interesting or fascinating to you, but most of the time when you're using Remix, this is a bad example, here's a good one. Most of the time when you're using Remix, you do have a loader, but you also are exporting a bunch of UI and stuff. And when you do that, that is a nested route, and it functions quite different when you include a default export of your of a component. And this is typically most of your stuff. Well, I would say for most Remix apps, most of the routes are actual like nested layout or UI routes. But what's special about this one is that it literally is just an endpoint. When you don't have a default export, that's a component. It's just going to be an endpoint. You hit it and it'll give you back whatever you sent back. Another really cool thing about this is that you don't have to send JSON. Like we saw, just send a string. You could send a PDF. You could send an MP3. You could send, actually somebody built one that allowed you to create a video on demand. You give it some query parameters to be like, hi Kent, I'm in a video. Like it was actually really cool. You give it, I think you gave it your GitHub username and it would give you a really cool animated video that shows like how many repos you've got and other stats about your GitHub, which is pretty rad, all generated via this. Somebody else has used this to build a Google Assistant app, which was pretty cool. So like whatever you want. Another thing, I was just today using this to create server sent events to build a live chat UI in my app. So pretty cool stuff that you can do with these alerts. Doesn't have to be JSON. Now, typically, if you're going to have UI associated to this specific loader, like a route, then you will probably want to return JSON so that UI can consume that, because that's the convention that we've got with the use loader data, which we've got right here. We're not going to use. But yeah, for these type of, we call these resource routes. For these resource routes, you're going to, you can return anything that you like. Another person actually compiled Svelte on demand and used Svelte with Remix, which was actually pretty wild. So like anything you want. All right, so we've got our loader. Things are good. Now we want to have some UI. And I know how much fun it is to just watch somebody write a bunch of JSX.
That's what I came here for.
Yeah, but it's not at all fun to watch somebody write a bunch of JSX. So we're going to, but I'm just going to grab all this. And you know what? Actually, I forgot to add the imports and stuff. So I'm going to go over to this blog post because it has the same thing, but it has the imports. And so I'm going to grab these imports. Woo! That makes it a lot better.
Does the blog post have the validation on the
The blog post has, yeah, I think the blog post does show validation somewhere up here. Or, yes, nope, it doesn't. You're right. Yeah, validation is cool in Remix. So we're not going to do it today, though. Okay, cool. And actually, in the blog post version, it looks like I say, hey, query is required, which is also another way to do that. So this invariant will actually throw an error if the query is not provided, which is, yeah, that's also acceptable. Probably would be better to send a 400. This will result in a 500.
So when you do an invariant or when you throw an error, let's say from the loader, what does it show with the UI? Or
Yeah. So for a resource route like this, here, let's just do it. So if I don't provide anything, I'm going to just get a 500, and it'll just give me the error. But for your UI, which is most of the time, it will. So you can create error boundaries in these nested routes, and it will find the closest error boundary and just render whatever that was. So which typically is a good idea to include it, maybe not in all of your routes, but at least in the main parent routes, so that if any of the children blow up, you have at least something to show the users. So arguably, this should probably, you know what? Let's just do it. If type of query is not equal to a string, then it will return a new response. Yo, you messed up, and status of part. Could be more helpful, but there you go.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
An API that returns JSON, shouldn't the error be in JSON?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, I don't opinion here. So.
Yeah. So error. There you go. Yo, you messed up. Oh, and we want that to be JSON. There should be an XML. Should be an XML. Yeah, you're probably right. We want to really mess with that. Actually, you know what? Normally, what I do for errors where I'm like they're doing something wrong on purpose, I'll do this: redirect.
Are you gonna?
And there you go. I gotcha.
All right, Ken, press it out quickly.
Yeah.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
How do you set a loader API route to a closed patch?
Yeah, great question. So loaders handle gets and head requests. That's it. I don't know, maybe they handle options as well, but who's doing option? No, just kidding. People do options, but I think loaders may handle options. I haven't tested it. Actions, action, this will handle all the other ones. So you want to handle those. One thing to keep in mind with forms, the way that the web works, forms can only submit a get or a post. There's no way with the web platform without JavaScript, there's no way for the web platform to do anything other than a get or a post. That's it. Or when I say the web platform, what I mean is the browser. Browser won't do anything but a get or a post. You can make a fetch that will do any method that you like, but yeah. So I pretty much only deal in gets and posts. Cool, thanks. Yeah. Okay, cool. So now we've got our UI. So I'll just describe some of this before we get to working on this. So this is our combo box. We're using this hook called use combo box. This is coming from Downshift. Anybody here use Downshift? Sweet. I made Downshift when I was at PayPal years ago, and I stopped using it myself. I left PayPal and handed it off to somebody else. And version 7 was just released. So like it's still in active development and it's awesome. So yeah, this is Downshift is a set of hooks and components that allow you to build enhanced inputs that are accessible. So combo box is an example, and that's what we're building. Okay, so with that, we were rendering just all the UI for that. And we're gonna want to render a spinner. We're going to do some pending state. Those will come in a little bit. The most important piece here now is I want to be able to type into this combo box, fetch these customers from this loader, and then render those customers out. So here's a really cool thing, and this was actually something that nobody had, I hadn't even thought of until I was working on a workshop, and I was like, where should I put this component? Oh, I wonder if I just put it in here. So Remix has some conventions on these routes and like what you export. You can export a loader, an action, meta, links, should revalidate, and then the default export, error boundary, catch boundary. Like there are a couple of specific things you can export. But it doesn't care if you export extra stuff. So what's really cool about what we're doing here is this is our full stack component. It's literally in the same file. All of this is right here. And so this component can be imported anywhere throughout our app and used. And this component is going to hook up directly to this loader. Now, there's nothing Remix specific about making that connection. What we're about to do is make that connection ourselves. But what's really cool about this is it allows me as the developer who comes in later and says, you know what, we need more information on the customers or whatever, to just come into this one component and have everything that I need to change at my fingertips right here. So this is really cool. So let's connect these two things because Remix isn't going to do anything special with this. Remix doesn't care about this customer combo box at all. So the first thing that I'm going to do is in Remix, you handle GET requests if you want to do additional. So first of all, take a step back. For loading data, you use a loader and then use loader data. That's for like a route getting data onto the page. But if you want to have some more data loaded like asynchronously after the user's typing or whatever, that doesn't involve some sort of navigation to a route that's not tied to a specific route, then you use what's called a fetcher. And it has a very similar type of field, but it allows you to trigger a load of data whenever you like without having to navigate between pages and stuff. So we're going to make our fetcher. Use fetcher. There we go. We're going to type it, actually, type of loader. So this, yeah.
Loader per component then? Or
no, we could do multiple. So we would, there would be one loader per file, so per route. But we could, so like we could make a separate file and have this one just use both of them or something. So like you could make a bunch of different loaders and have them have a single component use all of them. Or you could, actually, I'll get back to that and I can demonstrate how you would do the alternative, which probably is what I would do, is the alternative I'm describing. Okay, so the fetcher is basically allows us to make fetch requests, and we'll manage all of the loading states and stuff, so you don't have to do use effect nonsense. So with the fetcher typed with our loader, now the fetcher knows what the data type is going to be because it knows what possible return types there will be. And just to simplify things, I'm actually going to go back to the invariant. We can bring this back later if we want. You'd rather, if we've got time. But query is required. Yeah, there we go. Did I spell that right? Required. Yeah. Okay, so now the data type's a lot simpler. We can go back to that later, and I'll show you how to deal with that later. Okay, so with that, our customers are going to be whatever the fetcher data comes back as. So fetcher.data. However, our fetcher doesn't run until we tell it to. So like it's not doing anything until we've said, hey, let's run. So we're going to say it's going to be the customers that are on the data of the fetcher. But if that doesn't exist yet, because we haven't run it yet, we'll just go with an empty array. Just like default that to an empty array. And then we get to control, hey, when the user is typing, let's go ahead and trigger this fetcher to go, and we'll send it with the right query. So we'll say fetcher, actually, yeah, if, yeah, so we'll say fetcher dot load, or yeah, there are actually two options. So we can either load. With this, you're literally just like hit this URL and give me back what that is with a get. And that works. We would have to construct the URL query params ourselves, or we can just use submit and it will do it for us. So we're going to use submit here. So we're going to submit a query. Changes query or dot input new. This is complaining because the input value could actually be undefined. You cannot submit an object with properties that are undefined. The web just doesn't like that. So we'll just say if there's no input value, then we'll set that to an empty string. Okay, and then we'll just configure our request here with an action. Now, some of these might be kind of interesting to some of you. You're like, oh, action, method, encoding type. This looks like a form. That's because it's based on the exact same platform, the exact same primitives of a form. So for us, we'll say our action is going to be the URL that we want it to hit. Now, the URL we want it to hit is literally the file that we're in. So we just look, oh, what file am I in? Oh, resources. You got to spell it right, though. / customers. And then the method is get. And the reason the method is get is because we're hitting the loader. If we made this an action, then we'd say method is post or put or whatever. I would just do post. Okay, and that's it. We're actually done. It's not awesome, but oh, and now we have to actually use this component where we want it to go. So just the last little thing, stick this up there. Okay, so now if we go to our sales invoices new, there's our customer thing. And we say, there it is. And kablooey, because I messed something up. What happened there? 500 because I didn't provide a query. Hold on, I thought I did. Query is always provided. Oh, right. Type of is not equal or is string. It was provided. It was just an empty string. So there we go. Truthiness, falsiness, and JavaScript added again. Okay, now it's not going to go kablooey on us. Okay, so we're going to enhance this a little bit, get some like pending UI and other cool things. But this is pretty rad. I have built combo boxes in AngularJS. I did Backbone.js, the combo box of Backbone. I never did one in jQuery. Thank heaven. Actually, no, I did. No, it was date picker, but I used jQuery UI for that, so that's cheating. But yeah, in React, also with Redux, and I've never built one that was fully connected to the backend as simple as this. Like, just no chance. Yeah.
I'm curious what the purpose of splitting up loader and action was, whether it's just TypeScript, you just want to go.
Yeah, good question. So I was involved in those early conversations when we decided that. And why did we do that? I think it was it came down to the form. You have an action or a method of get and post, and like those are very distinct code paths. And so like you very well could be like export like handle data request, and then you have your request, and then you'd say if request dot method, then do equals get, to do my get stuff, otherwise whatever. And you would basically branch on every single one of these, whereas typical Remix code today with loader in action, you basically don't branch on the method ever, and so it really does simplify things.
So I was looking at the docs, and it says that it will compile it to like some Node.js server. Is that
So
understanding that correct?
yeah, so Remix actually it compiles this to just like a JavaScript file. You actually has two builds, so it can have a build for the server that has your loader and action stuff in it, as well as your UI stuff, and then compiles for the browser that has your UI stuff only. And then you can deploy that wherever and however you want. So anything that can run that JavaScript file works. So Cloudflare Workers, Lambda Edge, Dino, even like wherever can run that JavaScript. And so, yeah, as far as like, I hesitate to say that it compiles to a Node thing because it may not be Node. Like Cloudflare Workers is not a Node environment. It's like
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is there like an idea where someone could come in and target like Rust or some other language or something?
Oh, you mean like, so they're writing in Rust and it compiles to?
No, like the project, like the direction of the project. Is it all JavaScript based, or it could
Oh, you mean like the implementation of the framework itself?
like yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we all want that 700 times faster juice, right? Possibly. Right now, the compiler is written in Go because it's using ES build. It's pretty dang fast. So I don't know, like.
So the compiler is written in Go, but then it targets, like it exports
Yeah, the final,
JavaScript code base.
the built version looks like this. Look at that nonsense. Shh, beautiful. Yeah, it really is. Look at how it's like Christmas. That JavaScript stuff. It's wild. You take me back like 15 years and say, hey, Kent, look at this. And I'd be like, get that grossness out of my face. What is this? Yeah. But yeah, so it compiles to JavaScript for sure. And there's currently nothing like there was somebody at RemixConf who showed using Remix with WASM. And so like do whatever you want with that. It's wild. I've actually used FFmpeg, or no, it was ESBuild WASM on Cloudflare Workers, and within a Remix app. That was wild. Didn't end up doing what I wanted it to, so I didn't end up shipping that, but it was pretty cool. So yeah, it can interact, but yeah, it's all JavaScript. Well, one of the really important pieces, or one of the things that makes Remix so great, is that the code that server renders is the same code that runs in the client as well. And so because there's like this UI code is shared across this network chasm, it just drastically simplifies the progressive enhancement story, which we're actually going to get to here in a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So interesting enough, I was working on Column Box today. So I read it's straight React, and I ran into a few things that I had to do today. I'm wondering how this would do there. So a couple of big ones was I had to use a cancel token on the request because you're typing, you don't want to.
You got race conditions,
and I had a very slow server as well, and I was running about 50,000 entries, so I couldn't do a select box. So now I had to do caching on the front end where you search for a name like John, you grab all 25 Johns, great, and then I backspace, do Sam. I have to do Sam now, and then I type John again. So I have to grab those Johns rather than have to do a request with server.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at your stuff here. I'm like, hey, there's no. I mean, it is a request. You're not wrapping the request. You could pass in cancel token.
Yeah. So
and
first of all, these are great.
do like a debound.
Yeah, great observations. So, yeah, if you're hitting a server that like it's very expensive to hit this server, then yeah, maybe a debounce would be appropriate here. And it would be pretty straightforward to do that with this actually. Like there's like a 10-line hook that you could write called use debounce.
Will you give a quick definition of debounce?
Yeah. So debounce is, let's say you have a function that costs you $10 to run. And so you don't want to run it a lot because you don't have a lot of money, or you want to have a lot more money than you would if you ran it every time somebody wanted to. So in particular, when we're typing in here, like every keystroke is making a network request. So expensive function. So what we can do, most of the time when a user is using a UI like this, they're like, I want to type Santa Monica. I'm going to be typing, fairly rapidly. And so in that situation, we want to say, yeah, go ahead and call this function, but I might call you again like pretty soon. So if I do, like just wait a second to see if I'm going to call you again. And so the implementation of that is I'm going to wrap this function in another function that when called will wait at least like 300 milliseconds or whatever before actually executing the underlying function, the expensive one. Right, so make a cheaper function around it that will wait until it's been like 300 milliseconds or however long you configure before calling the expensive function underneath. So that's what a debounce is. And so, yeah, you could have like a 4 or 5 line hook right here, use debounce, and then you debounce this, but actually you'd probably debounce the entire function right here. So that's a solution for that. But then you were talking about, I type John, I backspace, I type Sam, now I backspace and type John again. I want to cache that so I don't have to, call the server for every time.
Well, part of it is you have a hook for use fetcher to make fetching easier. But, if it doesn't work with, debouncing stuff, it doesn't handle cancel tokens, you can't cache stuff, we end up having to write all that code ourselves anyway.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad you reminded me of the cancel tokens. That's all taken care of for you.
Okay.
The fetcher handles all that. So you'll never have a problem with race conditions.
Robust.
Yeah, it's rad. So as far as the caching, this is coming back to the web platform stuff. How do you cache HTTP? It's with the cache control directive, and you can say max age of like 60 for a minute. So we'll cache it for a minute or whatever. Except you have to headers. Here we go. So that's cache control header. Or you can configure that to be however long you want. And now this is going to be cached and not even touch my server for that user. So that's how I would do that. Browser's pretty good. Yeah, a lot of code you don't have to write. It's pretty great. Cool. Does that cover? Did you have any other questions about?
That actually is pretty ingenious. I didn't.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Thumbs up.
Use the browser. But the thing is, like most of us, how many of you are working in a spa, like a single page app that you don't have a server that like you're not server rendering? I guess let's start with that one. How many are not server rendering dynamic content? Yeah. So like I would submit that the vast majority of web developers are working in single page apps like that. Maybe they're server rendering, but most are not. That is different from the vast majority of web deployments are spas. I don't think that's true because we have WordPress, not a spa. But the vast majority of apps that web developers are working on are spas. And so for most of us, we can't just easily go and say, oh, I want this endpoint to have this header. We got to go talk to the backend team. What a shame. That's too bad. It'd be really cool if I could just like in the same file, I don't have to open up a different repo or whatever. Like I'm just right here. So I'll just add that cache control header.
So this, with that, essentially, you don't need a tool like SWR or React Query in Remix because you're already at the HTTP layer itself. So you don't need that to sit on top to interact with them.
Yeah, precisely. And there are a lot of shortcomings with JavaScript's implementations of caches too. So let's say I do my search and I've got that cache control. I do a search and I'm like, you know what, never mind. Forget that. I close the tab. I'm like, you know what, never mind again. I'm going to open that up again and I'm going to do the search. With React Query, you got to reload that cache again because it was all in memory. It's gone as soon as that tab's gone. With the browser's got its cache. It's going to hang on to that. And so it's still cached. On top of that, like, you don't have to write any JavaScript for this stuff. Like, you don't need to include that JavaScript. So, yeah, definitely, there are people who use React Query with Remix, and I don't fault them. I'm not sure what their needs are. I don't know why you would do that. But there's certainly people using React Router, which Remix is very heavily based on, using React Router with React Query, and that makes sense for like just a client-side thing. But if you've got Remix, I'm not sure why you would use React Query.
And then the cancel token, is that just if I make the same request, or sorry, I make a request, then make another one before that resolves, abort that?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I can show you that. We slow this down to slow 3G network. You can see that those pending requests get canceled. Except that one didn't. I'm not sure why.
It resolves quick enough.
Maybe. But Remix will manage canceling the requests and always make sure that the last request that was sent is the one that matters, right? That's all that matters. And this also matters with like creation of new records and like favoriting a bunch of tweets, like all sorts of things where I didn't even show you revalidation on form mutations. Like maybe if we have time, I can show you that. That will blow your mind. Okay, just think about this for a second. Think about all of the code that you write every day that has to do with application state management, whether it's Redux or Apollo or MobX or whatever the cool kids are using these days. I don't know, because I don't write application state management anymore because I use Remix. So just probably 30 to 50% of the time you spend working on your app involves application state management. I've been doing this a long time. That's probably right. Just imagine if you had that time to play foosball instead. So, just a thought exercise. Okay, so we're looking at a slow 3G network. I'm typing in here, and well, yeah. Hold on a second. Why was that so fast? It's not supposed to be fast. Okay, so I'm typing in here, and I'm like, what is going on? I don't know, and it's super annoying that I don't see anything. We're gonna add some pending UI. That's what I'm getting to. So how do we add pending UI? We're going to render a spinner. We got, actually, do I have that spinner in here? No, I don't. It's in the blog post. Spinner. No, function, spinner, right here. I'm going to grab that spinner. It looks amazing. Stick it down here. Okay. We're going to render the spinner. Got to spell it right. Doesn't work if you don't. Show spinner.
Well, who in here doesn't love Spiner?
Sorry, what?
Spiner?
Spiner? Yeah, we could do Spiner. No, just kidding. Okay, cool. As long as it's consistent, I don't care what it's called. Refer. Anybody get that joke? Refer? No? Raise your hand if you get that joke. Refer? All right. Refer was misspelled when they standardized it. Refer is spelled refer. That's how you spell refer. Well, somebody who wrote the spec spelled it wrong. And so now all browsers and all web servers understand both. So there you go. All right, we've got our spinner or our spiner. Doesn't matter whether it's spelled right. It matters if it's consistent. There you go. So we've got our spinner. Now we just need to know when to show it. So, and actually our spinner is also implemented to transition the opacity and everything for us. So that's how it like displays and hides and everything is through a transition. So it doesn't like flash or whatever. So looks nice. Okay, so this show spinner is going to be a variable that we declare up here. And we just need to know when this fetcher is doing something. If this fetcher is doing something, like making a request, then we should show the spinner. So we'll say fetcher dot, well, we've got submit data, type is actually getting deprecated. Pretend you didn't see this. Form, load, and state. There it is. State as idle, submitting, and loading. So idle is when nothing's going on. Submitting is when we're making the request. We've got the user's query and we're making that request and that the response is coming back. And then loading is a special case for revalidation. If I've made a mutation on the back end, then Remix is actually going to reload all of the data that's on the page, which is amazing. But that's the state there. For us, if it's not idle, then it's doing something. We should probably show a spinner. So we're going to say if the state is not idle, then we show it. show the spinner. And with the reload on slow 3G, when that finally finishes, we can now say that, and there's our spinner. That's it.
If you're making multiple requests simultaneously, do you access that state of fetcher? Wouldn't both requests be using fetcher?
Yeah, so if we had, like, let's say we have one fetcher in here for fetching customers, and then, or let's say state, and then another fetcher for fetching the customers within that state. So like you have two filters in here, whatever. So you would have two separate fetchers, and they will manage their own state.
Okay, so are you, this was fetcher was imported.
Oh, fetcher is coming from this use fetcher.
Gotcha, so you.
Yeah, so you just have two.
Never mind.
And actually, often I don't call it fetcher. I will call it something specific like customer fetcher. Yeah, normally I do that.
I thought it was imported.
Oh, man.
However, that is an interesting point. Is sometimes we have data fetching that's happening because we're transitioning to another page. And actually, if I think I've got this. If I go to customers, you'll see that little spinner up there. So that is a global transition that I'm just saying, hey, anytime we're doing any sort of transition from one page to another, if it takes a little while, I want to show this little spinner here. And so there is a way to hook into those global transitions because there can only be one. You can only transition to one place at a time. You can say, I want to go there, never mind, I want to go there, but you're only ever going to one place at a time. And so for those, it will be global and you use the use transition hook to access that state. But yeah, for fetchers, you can have a million of them on the page and each get their own state.
So you said you use Remix instead of state management. Does that mean you just store everything in the database, like where they are at in the app? And
Yeah, your database is your Redux store.
okay, so
Amazing. No dispatches or any of that nonsense.
well, yeah, it's basically like the traditional
Yes, it feels that way. Yeah.
better because you still get the
Michael, you and I are vibing.
yeah,
You get this.
Yeah.
You get this.
Really,
So-
anything that can take Redux out of the equation is good. In my opinion.
I used Redux at PayPal on one project. Never again. I did not like it from the start. Don't tell Dan. He actually knows. So yeah, actually, how many of you have been doing web for like over a decade? Okay. So around a decade, if you ever built a multi-page app, you will feel right at home with Remix, except all the things you didn't like about multi-page apps aren't problems in Remix. So just to whet your appetite there a little bit. Remix makes it feel like you're building a multi-page app. It's that simple, but you have the capabilities. Like, look at how easy it was for us to add a spinner to this thing. Try to do that with your multi-page app. That's not easy. So, great. Let's see what else. There's one other little thing in here that I want to demonstrate, and that is if I'm on a fast 3G network. Nope, that's a bad example. But actually, if we're not throttling at all, check out what happens here. You can't see it quite yet. Ah, man. Okay, I'm gonna have to do this. We're gonna arbitrarily slow down our request here. Wait, you promise set timeout. Well, gotta spell that right. After like 100 milliseconds. Really don't need that much of a slowdown. No throttling. Okay, maybe even less, like a 30 millisecond timeout. So you see the spinner, how it's flashing and how annoying that is? Flash with loading state. I built so many UIs that had that problem. When I was doing AngularJS, the way I solved this problem was I said, if the request takes at least like 200 milliseconds, then I want to show the pending UI for at least another or for a minimum of 300 milliseconds. So if I'm going to show the pending UI at all, I'm going to make the user watch the pending UI for at least 300 milliseconds so they don't get the flash. That's a way better user experience, even though it technically is slower. So that's effectively what we're actually going to do here, except because this is just a pending UI that's sitting over there, it's not actually going to slow it down showing the customers. So it'll show the customers as soon as they show up, but we're at least going to keep that pending state showing around even when the customers are there, just because that flash of loading state is garbage. One solution to this is just to delay when the spinner shows up. Like you could just say, hey, maybe we'll just wait 100 milliseconds. That's perceived as instant anyway. So I'll wait 100 milliseconds. But what if your request takes 130 milliseconds? Now you just like moved where the problem lives. So no, we're gonna do this. And the way that this works is actually, I had the same problem with the global spinner on my website for, you never control the network tab or like the user's network. So you've got to have spinners. So I had the same concern on my website, and the person who was helping me build it, Stephen Meyer, built this hook that we're going to use, and it's awesome. It's called use delay, spin delay. And for some reason, when that imports automatically, it imports default, but it's actually an import. So sorry. But use spin delay does exactly what I was just describing. So we're going to stick this in there, and that's it. So use spin delay will say, if whatever you gave me turns true, then I will not let this thing be true until this thing is true for at least like 300 milliseconds or 200. I can't remember what the default is. And if that does end up turning to true, then I will make sure it stays true for at least 300 milliseconds. So you can avoid any sort of flash of truism on this. So I guess we don't want to be true. I don't know, that metaphor is falling over. So now we're not getting any flash of loading state at all because it is pretty fast. But if I slow it down, let's do 330 milliseconds. Okay, maybe that's too fast. I can't remember what its defaults are, so 530. And we are going to get that spinner show up just for a second. But it's not a flash. And we can configure this to however we want to, what the times are. With delay and min duration. So I like, it's not like that has nothing to do with Remix. You can use this in your regular React apps, and I hope you do, because like that's way better than the flash of loading state. But I always like, if I'm going to show a pending UI, I always include use spin delay because it just like, that's so annoying. And I want you to use it in your app so I don't have to deal with your stupid flash of loading state. So I'm not mad at you, just mad at the world. Just kidding.
I'm kind of going back to the like state management and everything. When you were referring to I hardly ever use state management, you mean just the global state management?
Yeah, just global state
Okay,
management.
so
Yeah,
local state.
local state, totally cool. And I totally use it, but not a lot, actually. So the, let's see, the app that I'm working on for Epic Web is called Rocket Rental. And it's like, anybody use Turo or heard of Turo? It's like a place where you can rent out your car. It's like a Airbnb for cars. So, except hopefully they don't sleep in your car. Yeah, so I'm doing Airbnb for rocket ships so that nobody thinks it's actually, you're not renting out a rocket ship to a stranger. So, I mean, maybe one day, but so anyway, what in here, I haven't looked at this yet, but let's look for all the used states in this app. I've got one, and I wrote it today, actually. And it was for some optimistic, some optimization. Not necessary, but like just handy for optimization. In this whole app, this is not a small app. There are a bunch of routes in this app and lots of stuff going on in here. It's not fully fleshed out either. Right now, it's probably like 7,000 lines of code. 7,000 lines of code in one use state. Like, all right, I'm up for that. How about use effect? I've got a couple of those. One and login. This is for focusing on the first invalid element of a form. Oh, hey, look at that. Oh, look at that. I got an abstraction on my hands. Yeah, I'll get to that eventually. And then we've got one for, yeah, I wrote this today too. Use event source for server sent events. That makes sense. And use latest ref because React is funny. So yeah, not a lot of use effects for the complicated stuff, like the things that you end up getting a denial of service attack on yourself. So that's cool. Here, let's look at use reducer. No, that doesn't exist. How about use memo? I think I've got one in here. Actually, I don't use this anymore, so I can delete that. And yep, one right there. How about use callback? Yeah, I've got one with the thing that I could delete, actually. So yeah, you know, like Remix turned React into a template library for the most part. Pretty rad. I mean, I'm like in our example here, we're using use combo box. This has got a bunch of state stuff going on in there. Like there's still use cases for some of these really enhanced types of user experiences that you're building. But I just feel like when I'm a product developer, I'm just a product developer rather than like, alternatively, I've always felt like every developer was like a reusable component developer because like everything was so complicated.
So like one of the most common things is a toggle, like show and hide a modal, for instance, right? As the use state is always, you know, when you click a button, you call the function to toggle the modal and it shows up. And how do you do that without the use state? Like,
No, you probably use use state for that. But, it would depend on if you want that modal to be attached to the URL or not. So if you want the URL to change when the modal's open, then yeah, you can avoid use state.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want that to be as like a just toggle that, yeah, you're using use state. But here's the point. The hard part of state management is not what we're talking about. Like those little toggles, like that is, in fact, that was what I would do something similar for my interviews at PayPal. Like that was the first thing I asked is, okay, show me how to control state in a React component. Because like that's the most basic thing in React. If you can't do that, you're probably more junior, just got started here. And that's fine. We're happy to have you. If you're brand new, super happy. I'll teach you all about use state. It's great. The hard thing is the application state management. That's the thing that our senior devs are just like pulling their hair out over. And I'm telling you folks, it's just not a thing in Remix. Was application state management a thing when you were building your PHP apps? No, there was no app state management. You may have put a little thing into the cookie to like manage some sort of complicated workflow over time, but no, there's no application state management in a PHP app. But like we moved on from PHP for a really good reason. And I could go into this in depth, and I have. I've written a blog post about this in Epic Web called The Web's Next Transition. And so you can take a look at this. I like have these pretty diagrams that describe the architecture of MPAs, progressively enhanced MPAs, single page apps, SPAs, and what I'm calling PESPAs, progressively enhanced single page apps, which is what Remix is. And it's so good that SvelteKit is copying it, and Solid Start is copying it, and Next.js is, eventually they'll get around to copying it. They're trying to copy some stuff. I don't know. They just had NextConf, and they didn't say anything about mutations. That's like all what we do. We're constantly mutating. I don't know why they haven't dealt with that yet. Eventually, they'll get there. They will also copy it because it's a solid, amazing architecture that makes you feel like you're building an MPA, but look at this. This is a SPA document request. What happens when you request a document compared to an MPA document request, which looks like that. Just the number of boxes. Yeah, it's wild. So you feel like you're working in this environment, but you get all the power of a SPA. Read this blog post. It's long, but it's worth it. Sweet. Okay, so I'll just finish my talk. We like went on all sorts of fun tangents. It's fun. But I'll just wrap this up, and then I'm happy to just sit around and chill and talk about stuff, obviously. So the first thing to know is that when you don't have a default export, what you have is a resource route, and you can do a loader or an action there, and it's just an endpoint. So like you've got an Express API app, you can totally swap that out with Remix. And my Discord bot is a Remix app. So that's fun. Yeah, resource routes. You just don't have a default export. Now you've got an endpoint. We can export anything else that we like, and Remix will just ignore it, doesn't care. And then we can import that into other routes. And so now you've got this little thing that's packaged. You can render it anywhere, and it'll just talk to itself. It's all implementation detail. It's amazing. The co-location makes it easier for us to maintain. One other thing I should add is you can publish this to NPM. So if you're like an e-commerce business or something, I don't know, maybe you're Shopify who just bought Remix, and you're thinking about making like a shopping cart component that's connected to the Shopify APIs. Yeah, you totally turn not only the front end, but also the back end components all into a single thing that's published to NPM. You say, just stick this thing in your Remix config, and now you can use this component anywhere you want. Pretty rad. And it's all like server renderable and everything. Super cool. So with that, I just want to say one last thing. You're inspiring. Thank you.